Hi and welcome back to Just Turnings. Today I'm going to take the FoxFire Slimline Pen Turning Challenge. So FoxFire is a pen blank making company run by Todd, a good friend of mine. It supplies great blanks here in Australia. He runs a challenge where you need to make a slimline pen out of a tiny pen blank like this. So they measure about 12 millimeters by 12 millimeters and just about the perfect length to make what's known as a slimline kit pen. So I've completed this challenge before. This is a pen I made from it. It's one of the most difficult pens you'll ever actually make. Basically, when you're drilling through, there's absolutely no room for error. There's not much material, so it is very easy for the material to split just because it's very, very thin. What I'm actually going to do today, so it would normally be made out of a slimline pen kit, something like this, with all of these parts, which makes up a pen like this. I'm going to make it just using the ink cartridge and nothing else. So we'll get rid of all of that and just keep the ink. So this is, like I said, the previous one I made. Still one of my favourite pens, still in constant use in our house. It is our shopping list pen. Beautiful hybrid blank, which actually made it even more difficult. Just because the wood is even more difficult to drill through when it's so thin. So my plan is to use this silver one that I have and make a pen from it. So my idea when I'm first doing something like this, what I first do is do a very rough drawing of how I want the taps and dies and threads and everything to be. So I'm going to essentially cut it somewhere in half and then have a recess inside of this one, inside of the back half, which will have M7.4x5 thread. And then on the front half, there'll be where the ink will go through, that you'll be able to hold it, there'll be a tenon with a matching sort of external thread, which will twist on into the pen to hold it secure, and then the ink refill will run through. So as you can see, the ink refill will sort of sit there. I'll probably trim the refill just a little bit, just to give myself a little bit more room. So I did it very small, so you can't really see, but so I'll drill about a 7mm wide hole, just basically as far enough to do the threads. Don't really want to drill it any further, and then the rest of the way through will be about 3.5 millimeters, which will just be enough width to hold the refill. And then on the other end, basically all we have to do is drill through the 3mm hole till we get to just about the end, and then we'll sort of mimic this shape here so that we can get it to stick out further into out of the pen so we can write with it. I'll be using these two tap and dies that I have here. So it's M7.4 by 5. So it's got the tap and the die. I've never actually used this die before. Reason I have these ones is that this is the one that we would use for a Joe number 6 nib. So the person I bought all this sort of stuff off actually had the die for it as well, which I'm not really quite sure why he would have ever needed the die, and I've not needed to use it until now. But basically I was looking through all my taps and dies and wanted something fairly small, so that I didn't have to use as much material and to give myself enough room. So to give a comparison of the pen blank sizes, this would be roughly about a normal sort of size pen blank, so it's somewhere around 18, 19, 20 millimeters square. And gives you lots of room for drilling and making mistakes and sort of stuff like that. It doesn't matter if you don't get it 100% square, there's still lots of room there. So you can sort of see the size difference on this. There's really not much room for error. It's also shorter as well. Basically it's just designed so it's exactly enough material that once you've cut it in half and squared it up, that there's really not much material left. Okay, so we've got our two pieces cut up, roughly about half each. So what we'll do is mark them so we know which end is which. And we'll do the slightly longer one as the bottom, and then this will be the top where the nib comes out. So they're marked. So we'll start working on this one, basically because we have to drill the biggest hole in this half. So if anything's going to go wrong, it'll be at that process. So we'll start there in case we have to start over. Over to the lathe. Okay, so the first thing we need to do now that we've got it mounted in the chuck is to square up this end surface so we've got a nice square, straight surface to work with. So for this, I'm just going to use my parting tool on this occasion. So just try and take as little material off as I can. Okay, so the end part there is nice and square. What I'll just remove a little bit of this material here as well. So that gives us nice square end to work with. Just taking off those sort of sharp edges just so I don't accidentally catch it. And you can sort of see how much actual round material we have to work with, and it's not very much at all. So our next step is to drill. So because we'll be putting some threads on the inside here, so we need to drill a sort of small hole for that. So we'll start it off by using a center bit, so make sure we stay nice and straight center, and then we'll drill in about this much with our 7mm bit. Which will be the perfect size for us to cut the internal threads in there. So to the speed down, I do about 175 usually, but we'll go about 150 on this occasion. There. And tiny bit WD-40. So we just want to go in a tiny bit just to get the hole started nice and square. So we've got a nice sort of centered hole. Doesn't need much. This is one thing that we need to make sure that the hole goes nice and straight. So we want to drill in, we really don't want this hole any bigger than we need to make it. So we'll go for about 9mm, so I'll mark that on the drill bit. The less material we need to remove on this pen, the better, just because our margins for error are so small. So just check, make sure it goes in nice and square. Again, WD-40. Now things are going to go pear-shaped, it's going to be now. So you can see as it goes in, there's really not much room around the outside of the drill bit. So just take it nice and slow. Nice epoxy this one. Lots of WD-40. Heat is our enemy when doing this, so we've got to make sure we keep it nice and cool. Any heat sort of increases the risk of cracks or any problems. Okay, so we're going to about that mark. So it's gone in about 8 or 9 millimeters, which will be more than enough for our threads. So we've got a nice good... Okay, so we'll tap the threads on the inside here. So I've got my M7.4 by 0.5 tap here, so I just hold it my Jacob's chuck. So same, I'll leave it sitting just loosely a little bit, as close as I can in the tailstock, and then advance it up. We'll put some WD-40 in there, WD-40 on the tap. So I advance this up basically as far as I can without it actually grabbing the Morse taper from the Jacob's chuck. And then we will go backwards and forwards. So I'm trying to hold it so it doesn't block the camera. You don't need to be pushing in this way with your hand. The tap as you're turning it will sort of suck it in, it'll sort of self-thread in. It's hard to see that it's actually going in, but I can see from the mark sort of here on the Morse taper that it is actually going in. And so pretty much we just want to go till it hits the end of the hole, just to get threads all the way in. Okay, take it out. The important thing when you're removing the threads is that you let it spin out and unthread itself. If you just yank it out, it will destroy your threads. So I can see there's some nice threads in there. So we'll just run it through again. Try and clean out any mess that's in there. So it's got a 0.5 pitch. So it means it's only cutting into the pen about 0.25 of a millimeter on each side. Okay, so I can feel that's about where the threads got up to last time. You can sort of feel it as you're putting it in when you're holding it, whether it's cutting new material or not. You can just sort of feel it. Once you try it, you know what I mean. Okay. So unthread. There we go. And that should be good. So there we go. So what we need to work out next is to drill the rest of the hole in here for the refill to sit in. So far it only goes in that far. Basically, the pen, ideally it'll sort of stick out from the end about that much. We're going to have some threads in here which will go into there. So basically we need to work it out so that it goes about that far in. Makes sense, and sticks out like that. So we need to work out how far we need to drill in. So basically I did say that I'm gonna trim this refill down a bit. So we do have a little bit of luxury that we can just, if it ends up being a little bit too short, a bit too long, we can just sort of trim it to match. But basically we want to make sure we leave ourselves enough room. We don't make it too short. I'll just get another one. So I think we'll do as we want to go to about there. So I think if we... Okay, so I've shortened it, just cut off a bit of pliers. So in these things, they only actually put a tiny amount of ink in them, unless you go out and buy the really expensive ones. So now we just need to work out, so we're going to go in about that far. Okay, and that will be the distance I want to drill. Okay, so So the beauty about using such a small drill bit now is a much less chance of cracks because it's so much smaller now than the material. But we will still obviously be very careful. There we go. Just try and get rid of some of this resin. And then make sure this actually fits in. So it fits in quite nicely. So you can see that's sort of how it goes. It's quite flexible. And then we put this up here. So it threads into about there. So we can actually do with trimming just a little bit more off this refill, but we can do that later after we fit it. So that's it for this part. Okay, so I've got the top half of the pen in the chuck now. So what I first need to do is square it again, and then I'm going to add a about 7mm long tenon on here, which is about 7.4 millimeters in diameter. So it's pretty critical that I get this exact. So I probably want about 7.35, I think, so that we can then tap it on there so that it'll screw in nicely into our bottom half. Stitch. So the answer here now, I'm going to do about 6.5 actually. So I know the width of my tool is about 4 millimeters, so to about 1.5. Yep, so that's exactly 6, so I think that's more than enough. So the current diameter of it is about 11 millimeters, so we need to take that down to 7.3. So we'll just do it bit by bit, so we creep up on it. Make sure I'm stopping to measure regularly. So I can always take more material off, but I can't put it back on. My lathe has a braking feature on it, so it slows it down much faster than a normal lathe. So we're at about 8.6, so we're getting fairly close. So about 7.6, 7.45. So put a small anchor on the end here. Just makes things easier. Okay, so 7.5 all the way along, so another 0.15 of a millimeter take off. Okay, there we go. So pretty much spot on. 7 point. Don't mind if it's a little bit narrow at the end here before it gets back. That's okay. Good. Okay, so next thing we need to do is cut the threads on here. So I've got my tap, my die. So it'll go in here. First time using this, so there is the potential that, because I've not tested it before, got the right diameters, that it just cracks. So we'll line it up nicely. Just do that out. Okay, so lots of WD-40 for lubrication. And see how this goes. So I'm listening to how it cuts, so I can sort of, after you do this for a while, you can sort of hear the teeth cutting through the resin. You get to know what's a good sound and what's a bad sound. I can see nice ribbons coming off it. So we'll just unwind it, see how it looks. So we've got some definitely nice looking threads on there. So keep going. To the end. And I'll unthread it. And we have some nice looking threads there. So the moment of truth is if this will thread on for us nicely. PS2. It's a bit loose to begin with. It will line up. So I think it's going to work. Call that a win. Okay, so next thing we need to do is drill through with the small bit through here. So it doesn't need to go all the way through because it's we only want it to sort of go through up to about there, and then sort of have it so it sticks out that bit there. So we'll have to do a tiny little hole with a much smaller drill bit from that one. Unfortunately, the appropriate size drill bit for that I have is not actually long enough for me to be able to do it all the way through, so it means we'll have to do it from the other end, which will make things a bit complicated. But we'll worry about that when we get there. So basically we want to have it sort of sticking out like that, which means we want to drill it to about there. So we need a mark somewhere about there on the drill bit. Okay, so now we need to just drill this one through. WD-40, so we have to hope that we get a nice clean entry. Just try and hold it here, just try and reduce any wobble. So I can hear with my lathe when it starts to get a bit tight, the motor tries to spin up to speed up to compensate for the extra pressure. So that's when I know that the shavings sort of need to be cleared out. On a drill bit this sort of size, you have to clear it out a lot more often than you would a much bigger one. Okay, and so we'll switch to the... Okay, so I've got it turned around in the lathe now. So I'm going to just quickly square off this end with my parting tool. And I'll just move all this material here as well. Okay, so we've got a nice square surface, and what we will now do, drill with this tiny little drill bit, drill through until we get through to the hole on the other side. Where we just sort of essentially have to hope for the best that we are relatively square. So again, lathe speed right down. Especially with the very fine drill bit. Feel that's gone through to the other side now. Okay, now we have the two parts. So it's our ink refill, so we should be able to push it through here, and if we've drilled it right, it should just stick out of the end there. So we will probably take a little bit off that edge, and then this end should push in. It's a little bit out of shape where I've trimmed it. It does go in. And then we can screw hopefully screw the back on, and then it should line up perfectly like that. And so that is the rough shape of the pen. So basically now what we need to do is to turn it and make an actual pen out of it. So obviously there's two sections here we need to work on. This one, I was going to try and do it between centers, but a little bit worried that sticking the life center in here might damage it. So, but we'll need to do that anyway. So yeah, we'll probably do this one in between centers, so that one's fine. This one though, we're going to need to make a mandrel for it. So we'll make a custom one-off mandrel to use for this half of the pen. Okay, so to make the mandrel, I have a small piece of ebonite, so it's 10mm diameter. So what I'll do is turn a small section of this down to about 7mm, and then we will thread it on here, and then that way that will go inside there, and then hold that on there so that we can hold this in the collet chuck and attach the life center there and turn it. Okay, so first of all, I've got the mandrel or the ebonite mounted in my collet chuck, held nice and securely. So first thing I need to do is square off the end. done. It's got a nice square in there. So ebonite, if you've not worked with it before, is a type of hard rubber. It's sort of soft to sort of term, but it is quite hard and tough. It's not quite as brittle as some of the acrylics and resins. So now we've got that, what I'll do is just put a tiny little drill mark in there. With one of my very small center bits, so that our live center can go in. So speed down. A little bit, just so we've got somewhere nice and center to put our live center in. Tool. So basically, we essentially need to replicate this here so that it will go on and hold it. So again, it means we want to turn it to about 7.3, 7.4, and then the depth. So we're not drilling about 12 millimeters, so we won't go quite that deep, so we need about 10. Because the threads don't go right to the end, there's no huge benefit for that. So we need to do about 10 millimeters. So the reason why I chose the thin stuff is just because it shouldn't take too long to turn it down. Ebonite has a really lovely smell to it if you've never turned it before. You always remember the first time you turn ebonite. The smell lingers for quite a while. Okay, so we've got about 9. Should be fine. It's about 9.5. So we have that more. Eight. Four. No, that's the one that's too big. I was going to give it a knife a lot. I would use my hot eyes. This is what I'm doing. I'll do my eyes. Touch up the edge. In temporary mandrels, this is the way that you can do it. I wouldn't suggest using an ebonite or acrylic or something for as permanently as a mandrel, but if you're trying out a new design or just doing a once-off thing like this, it's fine. You probably get half dozen uses out of it before they really start to deform. So it's obviously best to have your mandrels made out of brass or something like that. Okay, there we are. Just take tiniest bit more off. Yeah, so I'm not sure how far in the threads went, whether it went enough for that, so we might have to take a little bit off this if the threads don't go all the way in. We'll find that out in a minute. Okay, so now we just need to pop a quick thread on here. So I've still got my M7.4 by 5 in my die holder. So the best thing about ebonite is that it just threads like a dream. You can do it at triple the speed of almost anything else. Once you've threaded with ebonite, you'll never want to go back to anything else. It's just beautiful. Okay, so we've got that on, so that threaded pretty well there, so we'll just do a test to see how well we've done. A little bit loose. So the trick is when it holds on here, how well it's going to hold. So we'll have a live center in here for all of our turning, so hopefully that should be enough to hold it securely. Okay, time to turn. So I've got it held on the mandrel. I shortened the mandrel just a couple, by about 5-10 mils, just so I can push a little bit further back in the collet chuck, just so it's a little bit less room for it to wobble. So held with the live center on this end, so we'll shape it. It won't need very much turning off it, just obviously because it's already quite so small. I'll be looking for a diameter somewhere around about 10 millimeters. And we'll go from there. And just hope this doesn't explode on me. So I want to be quite gentle with this. It's not much material to take off, so I don't need to be too aggressive. No rush. So stop and look, it's coming off nicely. Just make sure it rests down a little bit, not too high. That's a little bit loose there, so I just need a little bit more pressure.
A few minutes later.
So the trick for how good this pen will look will be matching our dimension here and then on the other piece, so as close as we possibly can. So for this one we'll aim for about 10.5, which I'll actually sand it down to that, and then the other one I will bit by bit match that as best I can. And now will be the delicate part, so we just need to try and part it off. So we want to try and leave as much as this can, but bear in mind that the live center has gone in a couple mil there. So just very gently part this off. Give it a nice little curve. So left with a little sort of nubbin there. I will clean that up with the sandpaper. So it's all turned nicely now, so we'll give it a sand and polish. I won't do that on camera, it's the boring bit. And then we'll come back and do the other half of the pen. Okay, so here we are, all polished up. So pull that off. So it's come out looking quite nice. I just sort of really gave it a quick sand and polish, didn't spend a whole lot of time on it. But it looks like it's got some nice sort of texture sort of to it, but yeah, sort of polishes up quite nice, just a nice sort of epoxy. So we'll now move on to the top half. Okay, so now it's time to turn this part. So what we can do is just basically put it in between a dead center and a live center, so turning between centers. So we do have to be careful we don't apply too much pressure that it makes this whole part bigger. There's a fair bit of width there for support, so we should hopefully be fine. But yeah, the main issue is that it might wear that hole a bit bigger than what it is there already. In that case, we might actually sand that sort of surface down a bit and take it back a bit. But we'll see how we go with that. So you have to be a bit more careful turning it this way. So obviously it's putting pressure inside, which is making it expand. If you just like wound it in tight, it would just crack it straight away. Don't want. Delicate balance of getting it tight enough that it'll hold, that it'll cut when we sort of do it, and not sort of spin with it. So let's see how we go. Just bring this tool rest a bit closer. Quite tight enough. The worst parts is the hard edges, so it's more likely to catch the tool.
Minutes later. It's about 11 there. Okay. Just take a tiny bit more off, then I'll do the rest of the sandpaper. Okay, and that's turned good enough to shape now, so I'll finish it up with sandpaper and I'll come back and show you the finished result. A few minutes later.
Okay, so we are all polished up. So finished product. Again, nice sort of fairly quick finish on this one. So we have our two parts, got it fairly close to matching. Goes together quite nicely, and we need to put ink in. I cannot find. So put it in this end first. Doesn't like to go in as it's not very nice shape bottom end where I've trimmed it off, so I need to clean that up. Just to push that in as far as I can. And then hopefully this will line up and just twist in. And that is our finished product. So it's a beautiful sort of silver pewter sort of look, sticks out nicely. I might sort of try and sand that off, that front bit, and shape it just a little bit more with some sandpaper manually. But there we go, all done. It's my beautiful pen, and I can successfully say that challenge completed.